Did you know that Rome's most iconic monument, the Colosseum, was once whole? Yes, the same ancient wonder that now stands in half-ruin once touched the heavens. But half of it disappeared. Not in a single night, not in a war or fire, but slowly, silently, over centuries. Some say the earth itself split Rome's pride apart. Massive earthquakes shaking the ground beneath its mighty arches. Others whisper that Rome devoured its own glory, that its stones were stolen, carved away to build palaces, churches, and dreams of power. And then, there are those who believe it was cursed, a place soaked in blood, echoing with screams, shadowed by the weight of divine judgment. Tonight, we'll wander through the forgotten streets of ancient Rome, beyond the noise of tourists, beneath the moonlight, where history still breathes in the cracks of stone. We'll listen to the silence where gladiators once roared, and to the quiet crumble of an empire that thought it could never fall. Because the missing half of the Colosseum is not just a story of ruins. It's a story of memory, of what time chose to remember, and what it allowed to fade into dust. So take a slow, deep breath, let the world grow quiet around you, and come with me into the shadows of Rome, where the stones still whisper of the glory that lived and the silence that remains. Crescent Moon, if you enjoy stories like this, calm, mysterious, and full of forgotten history, please consider subscribing so you don't miss the next chapter of Time's Hidden Tales. And drop a comment below with your city and the time you're watching this. Let's see where in the world this story finds you tonight. There was a time when the Colosseum was whole, not a ruin standing in silence, but a crown of stone glimmering under the Roman sun. Crowds filled every seat, senators in fine robes, peasants with dust on their feet, children holding bread and fruit, waiting for the thunder of hooves and the clash of blades. The air was alive, humming with the breath of thousands, pulsing like the heart of the empire itself. The sand in the arena shimmered gold beneath the light, stained by victories and deaths alike. Beneath it, tunnels wound through the earth, echoing with whispers, prayers, and the restless pacing of lions in their cages. Every roar above had its answer in the darkness below. The scent of sweat, iron, and fear mixed into one. The smell of Rome's power. A single motion of the emperor's hand could decide a man's fate. One tilt meant mercy, another meant death. The crowd would explode, chanting, weeping, screaming for more. The Colosseum wasn't just a building. It was the beating heart of Rome, a stage where life and death danced to entertain gods and men alike. But even the mightiest hearts eventually fall silent. Centuries passed, the emperors faded, and the marble that once shone like ivory turned gray with age. The laughter of the crowd was gone, replaced by the whisper of the wind weaving through broken arches. The empire that had conquered the world began to crumble, not by invasion at first, but by decay from within: greed, corruption, hunger. The same people who once filled the arena now struggled just to survive. Then came the day the earth itself decided to speak. It was morning when the tremors began, faint at first, like the growl of something ancient deep beneath the soil. The ground shuddered, dust fell from the arches, and before anyone could flee, the south wall of the Colosseum split. The rumble became a roar. Stones shattered, statues toppled. The proud arena that had stood for centuries bowed to the earth in a storm of debris and dust. When the sound faded, silence took its place. Heavy, absolute, eternal. Rome stood still. People whispered that it was a sign from the gods, punishment for centuries of pride and blood. Others said it was the earth reclaiming what was stolen, the sand, the stone, and the souls buried beneath. Whatever the truth, something changed that day. The Colosseum, once a monument of power, became a monument of loss. Over the years, the broken arena was not abandoned, it was harvested. The city stripped it piece by piece, taking its marble and stone to build palaces, cathedrals, and the Vatican itself. Every arch removed, every column torn down was another piece of Rome's heart transplanted into new glory. The same empire that once gloried in blood now rebuilt itself on the bones of its past. The Colosseum became both victim and donor, a silent witness to the city's hunger for immortality. The great arena slowly faded into shadow. Grass began to grow through its cracks. Vines crept across the stone, and the cries of gladiators were replaced by the soft rustle of wind. At night, the moonlight filled its empty corridors, silvering the ruins like a ghost remembering what it once was. The laughter, the cheers, the fear, all gone. Only silence remained. That silence carried weight, the kind of silence that remembers. Some said it was haunted, that if you stood there long enough, you could hear the clang of swords, the roar of the lions, and the thunderous applause that once shook the heavens. Others believed the Colosseum still breathed, still pulsed with the energy of those who had lived and died within its walls. But perhaps it was not ghosts at all. Perhaps it was Rome itself remembering the price of glory. Because the Colosseum wasn't destroyed by the earthquake alone. It was destroyed by time, by neglect, by the slow erosion of purpose. It was a reflection of the empire that built it, powerful, magnificent, and doomed by its own ambition. Centuries later, the ruins still stand. Tourists walk where emperors once sat. The sun still bleeds gold across its arches. The stones, cracked and worn, whisper the same truth. Nothing lasts forever. Every empire falls. Every monument crumbles. Every roar becomes silence. But within that silence, there's something strangely human. Because the Colosseum endures not as a symbol of Rome's power, but of its fragility. It reminds us that greatness isn't measured by how high we build, but by how much we remember after everything falls apart. If you close your eyes and listen, you can still feel it, the heartbeat of an empire, faint but alive. It beats through the dust, through the ruins, through the centuries that tried to bury it. And maybe that's what makes the Colosseum eternal. Not the stone, not the history, but the silence that still carries its soul. There was a day when the Colosseum fell, when Rome trembled and the world went quiet. But even in that silence, something endured. Not power, not glory, but memory. a memory carved in stone, whispering through time, waiting for anyone who dares to listen. The Colosseum is no longer a monument to conquest. It's a monument to endurance, to the idea that even when the world forgets your name, your story can still echo through the ruins. So when you stand beneath its shadow, when you look up at its fractured walls, remember that you are looking at the bones of history, the remains of a world that believed itself immortal. And yet, here it stands, broken, beautiful, eternal, because sometimes silence isn't the end. Sometimes it's the sound of history learning to breathe again. When the dust of the fallen Colosseum settled, Rome stood staring at its own reflection. A city of ghosts, built on glory and decay. The once mighty empire that had stretched across continents and commanded oceans now whispered its power through broken stone and fading echoes. The world had changed, but the ruins still breathed. Beneath the cracks, the memories of screams, cheers, and prayers still lingered like a heartbeat buried under centuries of silence. The people of Rome began to tell stories, not of emperors or warriors, but of the shadows that wandered through the ruins at night. They said you could hear the footsteps of gladiators long dead, pacing the corridors where they once waited for death. Some swore that on windless nights, they heard chains dragging across the sand, and the faint growl of lions hungry for a fight that would never come. The Colosseum, they said, was not empty. It was alive with memories that refused to fade. But the truth was more human than myth. The Colosseum had become a shelter. The poor, the forgotten, and the displaced came to live within its ruins. Families built fires beneath its arches. Children played where emperors once sat. The same walls that once echoed with the violence of spectacle now heard the soft murmurs of survival. Rome had fallen, but life went on. The empire's greatest monument had become its last refuge. There was beauty in that irony. The structure once built for death now keeping the living warm. The marble was gone, stolen to build cathedrals and palaces, but the soul of the place remained. Each night, the flicker of firelight glowed through its hollow windows, like the heart of a sleeping giant still dreaming of its golden days. As centuries passed, the world began to change around it. The Roman Empire was gone, and kingdoms rose and fell like waves breaking against the shore. But the Colosseum remained, scarred, weathered, and eternal. Travelers from far lands came to see it, standing in awe beneath its massive arches. Some called it cursed, others called it holy. All agreed it was a monument to something greater than stone, to memory itself. By the Middle Ages, the Church had claimed it as sacred ground. They said too much blood had been spilled there for it to be merely a ruin. Pilgrims came, crossing themselves as they entered the shadow of its walls. They believed the earth within had absorbed the pain of martyrs, the cries of the innocent who had died in the name of gods and emperors. Crosses were placed inside its arena, where once men fought beasts for the amusement of the crowd. The Colosseum, they said, had been purified. But even then, at night, people whispered of the noises that still came from the darkness below. And yet, through all the superstition and silence, something persisted. The Colosseum became more than a relic, it became a mirror. Every generation that looked upon it saw their own reflection in its ruins. The conquerors saw pride. The faithful saw redemption. The poor saw shelter. The artists saw beauty in decay. The poets saw eternity captured in crumbling stone. In the 18th century, travelers from across Europe came to Rome in search of its soul. They called it the Grand Tour, a pilgrimage through the ancient world. And when they stood before the Colosseum at dusk, when the sun sank low and bathed the ruins in gold and shadow, many found themselves speechless. Lord Byron wrote of it as a temple to time itself. Painters captured it on their canvases, always half in light, half in darkness, as if even nature remembered the duality it once represented. Glory and ruin, creation and destruction. But while the poets and painters romanticized it, the people of Rome still lived in its shadow. Earthquakes continued to shake the old stones. Weeds grew through its foundations. Whole sections fell away, swallowed by the earth. For a time, it seemed the Colosseum might finally surrender to history, collapsing into dust like so many empires before it. Yet somehow it endured. Perhaps endurance was its true gift. Even in ruin, it commanded reverence. Even when broken, it inspired awe. The tourists came, the pilgrims prayed, the locals sold relics and whispered legends. The Colosseum had outlived its purpose but found a new one. It had become the storyteller, the memory keeper, the witness that refused to forget. And as centuries turned into millennia, its story intertwined with the rise of a new Rome, a Rome of faith, of art, of survival. The Colosseum no longer belonged to emperors or crowds. It belonged to humanity, to anyone who had ever built something, lost it, and still found beauty in what remained. There's a strange peace in the ruins at night. The world outside moves fast, but inside those ancient walls, time slows. The air is heavy with the weight of memory. The stars seem closer. The wind carries whispers, not of pain anymore, but of endurance. You can almost feel the generations pass through it, leaving behind their stories like fingerprints on stone. And maybe that's what keeps the Colosseum alive. Not the tourists, not the historians, but the unspoken connection between past and present, between those who once lived and those who still stand in awe of what remains. It's a place where time folds, where you can almost hear the heartbeat of the ancient world still echoing beneath your feet. They say the Colosseum was built for power, but what it really became was a reminder of impermanence. It shows us that everything built by human hands eventually breaks, but not every broken thing is lost. Sometimes what survives the ruin is the soul, the story, the silence that speaks louder than all the cheers that ever filled it. When the moonlight spills across the arena, it feels almost alive. The shadows stretch like memories. The arches glow faintly, like old eyes remembering something they can never forget. The Colosseum doesn't just stand in Rome. It is Rome. Not the empire, not the conquest, but the endurance. And so it waits, not as a ruin, but as a heartbeat carved in stone, waiting for those who come not just to see, but to feel. Waiting for the next pair of eyes that will stand beneath its ancient bones and understand that nothing ever truly dies, not as long as someone remembers. Because the Colosseum has learned what no empire ever could, that silence is not emptiness. It's remembrance. It's the echo of every voice that ever shouted within its walls. It's history, breathing quietly beneath the stars. And that is why, even after 2,000 years, the Colosseum still stands. Not as a monument to Rome's power, but to the human spirit, fragile, fleeting, and eternal. Centuries passed, and the Colosseum, once broken and hollow, began to breathe again, not with the cries of gladiators or the roar of lions, but with something quieter, something eternal. It had survived empires, earthquakes, and the slow erosion of time. Yet now, in the modern age, it stood reborn. No longer a symbol of Roman cruelty, it had become something sacred, a living relic of humanity itself. At sunrise, when the first light touched its arches, the old stones glowed like amber. The shadows slipped away, revealing the intricate veins of history etched across every crack and crevice. Tourists came from every corner of the world, eyes wide, cameras ready. But when they stepped into the arena, a strange silence often fell over them. The chatter faded. The footsteps softened. For a moment they could feel it, the weight of centuries pressing gently against the air. It wasn't fear. It was awe, a kind of reverence that words can't quite describe. Because standing there, beneath the towering walls, you could almost see it all unfold again. The thunder of hooves, the clash of steel, the thunderous cheer of 50,000 souls demanding a spectacle. You could feel the vibration of history running up through the ground, through your feet, into your chest, the pulse of something ancient that refuses to die. Yet even as the modern world hums around it, cars, lights, voices in a dozen languages, the Colosseum exists in its own time. It is both ruin and resurrection. The scars on its walls are not wounds. They are stories. Each missing stone, each fracture, tells of battles fought not just by gladiators, but by nature, by time, by humanity itself. Legends say that when the world falls silent, when the last visitor leaves and the city finally sleeps, the Colosseum wakes. The moon spills across its broken bones, and the past stirs like dust in the night air. Some say you can hear faint whispers rising from the lower chambers, voices of the forgotten, echoing in the corridors where they once waited for fate. Not in torment, but in remembrance. It is as if the place itself remembers them, holding their stories gently in its stone heart. There are moments, strange, fleeting moments, when people claim to have seen shapes in the shadows. A flicker of armor, the shimmer of a blade, a ghostly audience frozen in mid-applause, vanishing when the moon drifts behind the clouds. Historians dismiss it as imagination, but poets know better. The Colosseum is more than a ruin. It's a vessel of memory, and memory never dies quietly. In truth, what keeps the Colosseum alive isn't the ghosts of the past, but the souls of those who still come to stand within it. The lovers who hold hands under its arches. The artists who sketch its curves in the fading light. The dreamers who stare into the void of its arena and wonder what stories still sleep beneath the stone. Each visitor adds something unseen. A thought, a feeling, a heartbeat, feeding the quiet life that still hums through its bones. It has seen humanity at its best and worst, mercy and cruelty, creation and destruction. but through it all it endures. The same wind that once carried the scent of blood now carries the laughter of children. The same sky that once darkened with smoke now glows with the soft light of dusk. The Colosseum no longer demands sacrifice. It offers reflection, and perhaps that is its greatest transformation, not from ruin to monument, but from violence to peace. Once it was built for death. Now it stands for remembrance. Once it echoed with screams. Now it hums with silence. That silence isn't emptiness. It's balance. It's the quiet acceptance that everything ends, but not everything is lost. Some nights, when the moon is full and the air hangs heavy with the scent of rain, you can almost feel the Colosseum breathing. The wind slips through its arches like a sigh. The marble shimmers faintly, touched by centuries of longing. It's as if the structure itself is alive, aware of its place in history, aware of the eyes that still seek it, the hearts that still ache to understand it. In that sense, the Colosseum is no different from us. We build, we destroy, we remember. We fall and rise again. We carry our scars like monuments, proof that we lived, that we endured. And maybe that's why it still moves us, because it mirrors everything we are. Fragile, enduring, beautifully broken. In modern Rome, surrounded by the noise of scooters, lights, and laughter, the Colosseum remains untouched by time. Street musicians play nearby, their songs drifting through the night air. Lovers sit on the steps, whispering beneath the same moon that once watched over emperors. Life continues, swirling around the silent sentinel. Yet somehow it always feels as though time slows when you draw close. For travelers, it's a destination. For historians, a mystery. But for those who truly listen, it's a teacher. It speaks not of war or victory, but of transformation, of how even the grandest creations crumble, and yet their essence lingers, reshaped by the years into something gentler, wiser, eternal. Perhaps that's what the poets meant when they called the Colosseum a wound that learned to heal. Because even in its brokenness, it has become whole in another way. It no longer stands as a symbol of domination, but of endurance, of the strange peace that follows chaos, the quiet beauty that follows ruin. And if you ever stand there alone, late at night, when the city sleeps and the air is still, you might feel it too. That hum beneath your feet, the soft pulse of history itself. You might look up at the endless curve of its walls and realize that you're not standing in the past, but in the present, woven together with every moment that came before. The Colosseum is not just stone and shadow. It's a reminder, a voice without words, whispering that everything beautiful carries a cost, and everything lost can still find new meaning. It's proof that time doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it transforms. And so, as the moon rises higher and the city glows below, the Colosseum stands, silent but alive, fractured but eternal, watching, remembering, waiting. And though the empire that built it has long since turned to dust, the Colosseum endures, not as a monument to power, but as a heartbeat of the human story. A story that still echoes every time the wind moves through its ancient bones.